2009, the Targeted Employment Act. Some of you will remember this from last year. It was the bill that kept on going, and we had to redo it like four or five times. We finally got it right. It took us so long to get it right that it died on the agenda. So we'll just have to, this should be relatively easy this year because we're running the same bill that we passed out of the House chamber last year. With that, I'll open the hearing and we'll get an update from Charles Reimer.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. House Bill 2219 establishes a tax credit for employers who employ persons with developmental disabilities, and it's called the Kansas Targeted Employment Act. The first part of the bill in Section 1 provides that the purpose of the act is to encourage employers to employ persons with developmental disabilities in Kansas and decrease the reliance on the associated costs of taxpayers to fund governmental programs. There are a couple of important definitions in the bill. First of all, competitive integrated employment. The employer to receive the tax credit for employing the disabled or individuals with developmental disabilities has to provide the employment in a competitive and integrated environment, and that is defined by federal regulations. And basically, those federal regulations provide that the individual has to be compensated at a rate that is at least the state or federal minimum wage. And further, the wage rate must not be less than the customary rate paid by the employer for the same or similar work performed by employees who are not individuals with disabilities, and the rate that would be paid to individuals who are similarly situated in similar occupations by the same employer and who have similar training, experience, and skills. And the individual, the employee, needs to be eligible for the same level of benefits provided to other employees. The employment has to be at a location where the employee interacts with other persons who are not individuals with disabilities. And that to the same extent that individuals who are not individuals with disabilities and who are in comparable positions interact with other persons. So a regular business environment. And then in addition, finally, that the employer prevents opportunities for advancement, the employment does, that are similar to those for other employees who are not individuals with disabilities. So the idea is that this is a regular type of employment situation. There's a definition of earned income. As you'll see when we discuss the tax credit, it's based on earned income paid to the employee by the employer. That means compensation paid for competitive integrated employment equal or greater to the minimum wage performed in a competitive integrated setting as discussed. The individual that may be employed by the employer to earn this tax credit means an individual who has a developmental disability. They're documented by the Secretary for Aging and Disability Services and has agreed to provide the Secretary for Aging and Disability Services information that permits the Secretary of Revenue and the Secretary of Aging and Disability Services to actually take care of their responsibilities under the Act. Targeted employment business, that's again a term that refers to employers who are going to be eligible for the tax credit. On page 2 of the bill, again, that's a reference to employing eligible individuals in a competitive integrated employment in a competitive integrated setting. And in addition, these businesses to receive the tax credit must be authorized to do business in Kansas. They have to pay the income to the eligible individual in a calendar year. And this does not include a community service provider. an organization that would provide services to individuals with disabilities. So Section 3 of the bill pertains to the tax credit. The credit is limited to tax years 21 through 26, so this has a sunset built in. The credit is allowed for every hour that an eligible individual is employed in a calendar year and receives earned income. That's what the credit is based on. It is 50% of the wages paid up to a maximum credit of $750. It is not refundable. It is not to be carried forward. Another provision in this bill that allows eligible individuals, the employees, to receive support or services as needed at the work site to help them maintain employment, and those services can be provided by a community service provider. There is a maximum amount of all tax credits allowed in each tax year of $5 million. Section 4 of the bill just provides for information that the business must provide the Secretary of Revenue, and the business must agree to provide certain information to the Secretary of Revenue, and also the employed individual must agree to permit the Secretary of Revenue or also provide information to the Secretary for Aging and Disability Services as part of being able to participate in the program, so that there is a waiver of information as part of this bill. That's just rule and reg authority in the second part of Section 4. And then Section 5 is also an important part of the bill that provides that the Secretary for Aging and Disability Services is to develop and implement a program to measure the results of the tax credits. That program is to include an analysis of decreases in reliance on state funded subsidies for employed eligible individuals and any associated net savings to Kansas taxpayers resulting from such increases in reliance. Secondly, the Secretary is to analyze the effects of reallocation of tax dollars that employers would have paid to the state government, but are instead paid to employers who employ eligible individuals pursuant to the tax credit program. And finally, the Secretary is to analyze the benefits or detriments to the quality of life and the standard of living for employed eligible individuals. And again, here we have a provision that the Secretary can require individuals who are employees and also the employer business to provide information to the Secretary of Revenue that is necessary to assess the tax credit program. That will allow the Secretary for Aging and Disability Services to make the analysis required by the bill. And a provision there that protects confidential information in Section 4 as well. And then additional provision of Section 4 just provides that the Secretary of Revenue is to provide the Secretary for Aging and Disability Services with tax information as necessary. And then finally, the Secretary for Aging and Disability Services is to submit a written report based on their analysis to the Standing Committee on Commerce for the Senate and also the House Commerce Committee on the first days of the 2022 through 2026 regular sessions of the Legislature. Section 6 is again a sunset provision. The provisions expire on January 1st, 2027. And finally, this bill would come into effect on July 1st if it would be enacted. And that is what the bill does.
Thanks, Charles. Does anybody have questions on the bill? Representative Highland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Charles, on page 2, line 3334, refresh my memory. Is that for each business, or is that for the total of all businesses across the state?
That would be the total of all businesses across the state. That would be the maximum credit allowed for the program on an annual basis.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Charles, this allows for outsourcing of work, and if I owned a business and hired someone with a developmental disability and was paying them $15 an hour, I could get a credit of $7.50 per hour, but not more than that, the way I understand it. But if you outsource the work, do you still have to list the individual that is doing the work if you're outsourcing it, or do you list the company that you're outsourcing your work?
It's going to take me a minute to I would say, Chairman, that the way the language reads, the credit is available to the taxpayer, as you point out, outsourcing work. So that's on page 2, lines 11 through 15 there.
I was looking at section 4.
Yeah. However, the provisions pursuant to providing submission of information references targeted employment businesses on lines 15 there on page 3, that's section 5. And also, as you point out in section 4, it references again targeted employment business. So obviously on a logical basis, that would be the employing business. But that is probably something that might be clarified because right now the language specifically references targeted employment business, which is a defined term. However, if you look at the definition of targeted employment business on page 2, lines 4 through 9, those employers employing eligible individuals in a competitive integrated employment in a competitive integrated setting. So I think if you look at that definition in conjunction with the references, I think it would be reasonable to, an interpretation would be reasonable that the business that is actually employing the individual would be the one to provide the information.
Okay, I think I've got it. So if you're outsourcing work, you don't get the credit. But if you're the targeted employment business, you do?
No, if you look at the language regarding the credit, that's on page 2, section 3, lines 13 and 14. So that permits the credit against the taxpayer qualifying as a targeted employment business or a taxpayer outsourcing work to a targeted employment business. So the credit is for the targeted employment business, and that is also the entity that actually employs the eligible individual, and that is the entity that is required to provide information to the Secretary of Revenue and the Secretary for Aging and Disability Services.
So then is that something that we need to probably clear up? If it looks like you're going to get a tax credit for employing these people, and then also someone else could get a taxpayer for doing, can get a tax credit for doing business with that company. Is that the way this is kind of written?
Well, yeah, the language is, I don't think, obviously, the intent is to provide 2 tax credits. The language could possibly be clarified.
Okay, we can discuss this offline. We'll just have to get that cleared up. Are there any other questions for the reviser? Seeing none. Okay, thanks, Charles. That I'll go ahead and open the proponent section, and we'll take Mike Burgess first from Disability Rights Center of Kansas.
There we go. Howdy, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. It is my privilege to be here on House Bill 2219 as a proponent. This committee worked really hard last year with a lot of stakeholders, and I think we made a lot of progress, ended up at a good point. There's a lot of really good policy in here. As most of you know, individuals with disabilities are typically the last hired and first fired in difficult times, and obviously that's where we're at. So this bill would be a meaningful step to help address that for individuals with disabilities. And we know, I'll very quickly refresh, we know that people have better health outcomes when they're able to be competitively integrated, employed in the community. And so with that, I would be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time. I think the chairman asked some really good questions. I think one aspect of the transferability of the tax credit is a number of the providers are nonprofits. And so to create that ability for them to be able to take advantage of this, they need the ability to be able to transfer that benefit. Because at the end of the day, the person who's outsourcing that business to the community service provider, or the targeted employment agency, they're the ones who will be paying to help incentivize that benefit that the state receives as far as the reduction, getting folks who are able to be more independent and employed in the community. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Okay, someone with a developmental disability, what are they usually paid per hour?
Well, it depends. I mean, it varies widely. I mean, there's individuals who are competitively employed in the community, and they can make, I mean, there are probably experts from vocational rehabilitation who could talk about the range of salaries of the individuals that they help gain employment. I know, you know, and it can range from individuals in a sheltered workshop might be paid a piece rate. That wouldn't qualify under this. So you're to be a competitively integrated employment, you know, they will be making at least minimum wage, and ideally what paid similar to non-disabled peers are paid for a similar job.
So do you suppose that if we gave a tax credit of $7.50, and it's a 50% tax credit, would that get most of these people to a $15 wage if they aren't there right now?
I think it provides incentive for employers to not, we're not setting a threshold. I mean, that was one of the issues last year where you set a really low threshold. You're creating a floor. And that's the last thing, you know, we want people to be able to get jobs in the community and to have opportunities to grow, you know, to get into a career and to grow, not just be stuck in a minimum wage type job. So that's why the cap, having that at $7.50, I think that's is a very reasonable. I mean, obviously we would love it if there was no cap, but I understand, you know, there's a number of safeguards in here. That was one of the ones to help keep the cost low. And I think the committee arrived at a meaningful measure there to cap that at $7.50 an hour. Because ideally somebody could be, I mean, there are people that could be providing value, and you wouldn't want to artificially incentivize them paying somebody only minimum wage. You know, like I said, you want to create a career path, ideally for folks to be able to grow into that. So yeah, the vast majority of folks are probably going to be paid closer to minimum wage early, like a lot of us were early on in our careers. But as they are able to grow and develop skills and move through their career path, you know, I really hope that they're able to make more than that. And this provides a good incentive for that.
Okay, so these tax credits are non-transferable. You can't carry them forward, and they're not creditable, so you can't get money back. But the fiscal note on this is $5 million, and it's year one, $5 million out of the state general fund. What's a realistic number at $7.50 an hour credited?
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure I could give you that answer. Some of the other conferees might be able to better answer that. I would assume there's going to be a little bit of a ramp-up time to get this in place. So, I'm not sure what assumptions went into the fiscal note. I know, per the bill, it is capped at that $5 million a year. So that's absolutely the most you could pay. And the beauty of this is one of those things where somebody they have to actually do it before they receive the credit. So if we do hit that $5 million cap, that means we've actually provided jobs to that many folks and they've been paid wages. And that's very much a good thing.
Okay. Any Representative Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this question, I'm going to ask you, Mike, but you can defer to somebody else that at the appropriate time when they provide testimony. But in the past, when we've had this particular hearings on a bill of this nature, we've been able to get a kind of a cost benefit. And maybe the chairman of social service would even be able to weigh in on it. But is there someone that's going to give us a financial look at the cost benefits when we look at that individual and what it costs for Medicaid to provide their monthly, subsistence compared to when they actually have a job? I know they would maintain their Medicaid health care, but what other costs might be offset when we look at that fiscal note of $5 million? They only did one side of the fiscal note. Is there another side of the ledger? That's
absolutely.
Too.
And I believe, and I haven't looked at their testimony, but I believe the representatives from COF, at least last year, that was part of their testimony as they talked about the benefits of the bill. And the other great thing about this, unlike some of the other, during my day of a long time ago when I was in here, we didn't typically evaluate the impact of tax credits. That's baked into this bill. You're going to get that evaluation after the fact. But you're absolutely correct. You look at the waiver costs, there's a direct cost to the state as well as the federal government for the participation in the Medicaid, and we would likely see a reduction on that side of the ledger as well. So that's a very good point.
Okay, hopefully we'll hear about that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any questions? Representative Dodson.
Mine is similar to her question, also to the chairman, but this seems on the surface to be very logical. And the bill, says that the objective here is to reduce the cost to the taxpayer. Yet when you look at the fiscal note, it's $5 million a year for either 4 or 5 years and 6 FTEs to handle this thing. And then about $750,000 to set it up in the beginning. But it just seems logical again that putting people out to work where they can progress and become more active citizens returns to the state. So, yeah, I'd be anxious to hear about that as well.
Yeah, and that's absolutely an ongoing benefit too, because once somebody, the best indicator of future employment across for any population, you take any young person, the best indicator, or any person rather, the best indicator of future employment is previous employment. So if we can get people competitively employed in a setting, they're going to pick up skills, and it's going to make it that much easier for them to get their next job. And the more they're able to work, the more hours, that's with day services, for instance, if they're working, they're not in a day services program, so the state isn't paying for that portion of it. So and this is an ongoing, so if you catch somebody, the program is a period of 5 years here, but for those folks, hopefully they have a lifetime of employment in the community. And there's innumerable benefits. Ideally, they'll be able to save for their retirement and do other things. Again, all those best practices that we all want to do, this will help make that available for those folks as well. And so like I said, there's a lot of ongoing benefits throughout the rest of the lifespan, not just for the year of the tax credit. So,
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Seeing none.
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Committee, we have another in-person conferee that is here. We received his testimony after the committee started. I believe we emailed that out. Yes, it should be in your email. Look for an email from Cindy, and that is from Nick Wood, with Interhab. Nick, welcome to committee.
Thank you, Chair Tarwater and members of the committee. I maybe should have gone last. We have a couple of conferees here who are more of the operational experts of a program like this. We just really want to emphasize that there's a huge national push and a lot of demand for employment of people with disabilities. People with disabilities are often chronically underemployed. For people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, around 80%. So this really would give an opportunity for employers to really kind of broaden their ideas about who's employable, what the talent is out there, understanding the potential benefits to their organizations, but also, just letting people with disabilities have a foot in the door, essentially. There was some discussion around the sort of the cost benefit of this program, and obviously that's what this program is trying to assess. If people are making a higher wage, then they're able to pay for things that otherwise would be subsidized, food assistance, housing assistance, and that sort of thing. So we think this is a good program. We think this is something that Kansas should do. It would sort of get us off the bottom of the barrel, really, when it comes to employment with people with disabilities. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, and yeah, I'm sure the numbers are there and provable, but it'd be nice if one of the conferees could put something together for the committee that would kind of spell it out, so that before we work this bill, and probably do that early next week, but in order to feel more comfortable, we probably need to see something like that.
We definitely will follow up with the committee.
Any questions? Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, one of my questions would be, do we have an idea of how many employees that this would cover? The 5 million, we have a rough idea. I mean, that would be something I suppose you could include in that analysis. Is one of the reasons I bring it up is just simply the fiscal note. I mean, I always crack up with, and this isn't necessarily to you, but whenever we do something, it's a simple program, and the agencies always look at it as a cash cow, how they can add more people and get more money out of SGF. And so it'd be interesting to see how many people they're actually going to have to follow and look through to decide if the fiscal note is anywhere close. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Seeing no further questions, thank you. I don't think we have anyone else in person. Is anyone else here in person to testify on this bill? Seeing none, we'll move on to the online testimony. Rachel Snow, COF Training Services.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commerce Committee. My name is Rachel Green. I'm the Director of Operations at COF Training Services, a community service provider for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I'm here today as a proponent of House Bill 2219. I would like to take some time to answer some of the questions that have been asked. So with a lot of the tax subsidies that we have, that individuals that we support receive, there are different formulas to determine how much they receive. So for example, food stamps, housing assistance, Medicaid waiver services, SSI, SSDI, all of them have their own formula to determine how much they get based on how much they earn. So that makes it very difficult for us to assess specifically how much the tax saving will be, because we don't have access to that formula. So that's the reason that this bill specifically proposes a study to be done and information to be gathered during this trial period so that we can assess what the actual fiscal impact is. But I'm sure that my coworkers and I can put together an example or a case study of what that might look like based on individuals that we have worked with. So the overall intent of this bill, I think it really does address some of the major challenges in Kansas that we are facing. So that first challenge that I think it addresses is tax subsidy reliance. A heavy or over reliance on Medicaid and other types of government subsidies has become unsustainable. This unsustainability is clear when you look at the 4,000 individuals with disabilities on a waiting list for basic needs from Medicaid services. Some of these individuals are waiting up to 10 years due to lack of available funding for these services. The second
Power outage. Rachel, you still there? Looks like you're back.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
We missed the last couple of seconds of your testimony there.
Okay, thank you. So on that second, the limited opportunity and low quality of life is another challenge that we face. So many Kansans who experience disabilities have limited employment opportunities afforded to them, and or impairments which bring challenges that impede their ability to find, obtain, and maintain employment in Kansas. For many of those individuals, the lack of meaningful employment can have a negative impact on the quality of life. And as we're talking about those financial impacts, that always impacts their overall mental health as well as their medical health. So a lot of individuals that have a lower quality of life have a higher cost in medical services and behavioral health services for mental health providers. That third challenge that we're facing in Kansas that this helps address is the workforce need. So alongside this decrease in employment opportunities for individuals with disabilities, there's an increased need across Kansas communities for more workers and a stronger workforce. This unmet workforce needs in Kansas has led Kansas employers to outsource their work to other states and even other countries. So when we're talking about savings, that's another potential saving because you're promoting Kansas companies to keep their work in Kansas and thus getting the tax from that work being completed in Kansas. If you'll refer to my written testimony, it includes an image which provides a visual on how the Kansas Targeted Employment Act works. The act aims to address the issues outlined above by incentivizing employers to target their employment efforts towards individuals with disabilities who are also reliant on tax subsidies. As individuals who are tax subsidy reliant increase their earned income through work, there's an inverse correlation or a decrease on their reliance on those subsidies. Therefore, employing these individuals leads to that potential tax savings. As stated before, we're not sure exactly what that tax savings looks like, which is why we strongly encourage this study to be conducted during the implementation of this program. Incentivizing employers to target their employment efforts towards this group also then increases the opportunities for meaningful employment for these individuals. The concept itself is a workforce solution. As employers target their employment efforts towards that group, they're tapping into a population of people who are traditionally unemployed or underemployed. I'd like to take some time now to share some facts and some of my personal experience to further express the need for this program. As stated previously, there's a critical need for that larger, stronger workforce in Kansas. In fiscal year 2019, the unemployment rate was 3.3%. During the 2020 pandemic, that peaked in April at 11.9%, but thankfully, Kansas is recovering well, and the current unemployment rate is 3.8% as of December 2020. So despite that low unemployment rate, when you look at individuals with disabilities, it's extremely high. As the proponent before, Nick, stated, the average unemployment rate for individuals with disabilities is 80%. And again, while that unemployment rate seems low when compared to the employer need, that picture doesn't look so bright. A survey conducted on Kansas employers in October of 2019 showed that job vacancies supersede the number of unemployed people in Kansas. As it stands today, employers typically avoid hiring individuals with disabilities due to a multitude of reasons, some of those being lack of understanding of this population, lack of experience employing these individuals, assumed limited abilities of these populations, and or financial barriers to employing individuals who can't meet production expectations. These concerns are only directly overcome through experience employing these individuals, and this act encourages them to tap into that employee group in this unfamiliar territory. It's really critical that we understand that many individuals who are reliant on tax subsidies want to work, but they're not afforded the opportunities to work. Most people have heard the phrase, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. There are so many people out there who are being given fish while begging for the opportunity to learn to fish for themselves. I feel it's also important for us to understand that disability is an open club. Anyone can join at any point, not by choice, but by circumstance. You are one car accident away from living the rest of your life with a disability. I've had the wonderful opportunity to work in the field of supporting people with disabilities and was also blessed with the experience of having a sister with a developmental disability. Because of that life circumstance, I've seen firsthand the limitation of opportunities afforded to these individuals, despite their desire to work, which perpetuates their reliance on government programs. People who need employment need people who are willing to employ them. And sometimes employing an individual with a disability is not about finding the right person to fit your current structure, but by assessing your current structure to determine how you can employ that individual. This is a concept called job carving. My sister, for example, struggled with finding a job opportunity for many years where she could meet all labor expectations. But we found a hotel employer that was looking for janitorial staff, and they were willing to assess their position and to allow her to complete the tasks that she was able to do. So she wasn't necessarily able to walk into a room after a guest left and completely clean the room and prepare for the next guest, but she was exceptional at cleaning the bathrooms and floors. They hired her and employed her from 2017 to 2019 and gave her that job that allowed her to do the things she could do, and someone else completed the tasks that she couldn't. Unfortunately, she was laid off during the COVID pandemic, and she lost that opportunity for competitive and integrated employment and hasn't been able to replace that job despite her efforts to look. She's currently very thankful for the opportunity to work on a couple piece rate contracts, some of which she makes above minimum wage because she produces at such a high rate. She is, however, very hopeful to be able to establish herself again in a competitive and integrated job. But as I stated, most employers aren't willing to give her a chance despite her reliable work experience. Also, given the current political environment at the federal level, the access to work opportunities that Piece Rate provides are also now being challenged and potentially removed. If there are no tools added to increase employment opportunities for individuals with disabilities by removing Piece Rate, many individuals will only be losing the one area where they have been able to reliably earn an income. By passing this act, we can establish a tool to give these individuals another option for gainful employment. I will now stand for questions.
Any questions, committee? Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been remaining quiet. It's one of those deals where I'd rather be thought an idiot than to open my mouth and remove all doubt. So one thing, this is incredibly complicated, and what made it, with COVID, it was very timely last year with 3% unemployment because employers were looking hard to find good employees. These folks are traditionally very trustworthy, very reliable, and if you can find a slot that they can handle that job, you will have an employee for life, literally. And so, but it's the funding formula, that's why I've kind of kept quiet, it is very, very complicated, as the former, or the testimony from the young lady there, and I've studied it for 3 years. And I think what happens is the biggest problem that I see is that the funding, nobody wants to fund it long enough to see the results. And it's just that hard, because it doesn't happen. You're not going to snap your fingers. You're probably not going to see results from this for 2 to 3 years. You will see results, and you will see an incredible increase in quality of life for these folks, but it's just not going to be something that's going to happen overnight. And so I think that's probably been the biggest downfall of VR programs, vocational rehab programs in the past, and continue into the future. So that's what I'll say about that. Thank you.
Any questions for the conferee? All right, seeing none. Sorry, Representative Shu.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. This might be more of a question for a member of the committee, maybe Representative Williams or Burrows. I'm looking at the fiscal note and how KDADS requires quite a few FTEs to kind of study the efficacy of the program, right? And I'm wondering if you know, legislative post audit already does a lot of this. So I'm wondering if we can get that down a little bit and have post audit take that over to get the fiscal note down. Just wondering if there are general opinions on that.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have already approved audits for this year, and we would not approve new audits until May. And so if the legislature wanted to pass this into law and to get it going, so KDADs could provide us reporting, and per the representative from Butler County's comments, that it's going to take a while to see the results, and it's complicated. I don't know that the audit would have enough data right now to do it. But it could be something, if implemented, that they could do that. You know, that could be requested. The other thing is that we, for economic development tax incentives, they are part of a rolling audit with LPA. So if this generates more than $50,000 as a program, therefore it will qualify. And so it would probably be in the queue for those included, like STAR bonds and HPIP, and all of those are in the queue. So because they are now part of the transparency data reporting. And David from the Department of Commerce could probably correct me or add to that. So I think we may have some long-term built-in solutions, and then short-term, I think the KDADs would be the audit.
Representative Shu, did that answer your question, or were you kind of going down the road of these could be redundant positions and we could assign that task, or that task may already be being, you know, set up?
Yeah, just kind of thinking of ideas to get the fiscal note down a little bit. If people decide that this is something that is needed, I'm okay with it, but just thought, you know, post audit is there. But I think that did help answer my question.
Representative Williams.
Representative Shu, I just want to say, can I hold your baby? She's so cute.
She is, you can try to hold her. She's not super amenable to it right now.
Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got a phone a friend. We passed a bill in 2019. The bill number was 2044. And we might be able to find some fiscal notes in that bill. It was passed in 2019. Charles may be able to find it for us.
Okay, thank you. And while you're here, regarding possible Medicaid savings, I know it's very complicated. These individuals typically have waivers for Medicaid, correct?
They do.
Okay. Does income affect their waiver? If they started making $15 to $20 an hour, would that take them off of Medicaid, or would they still be allowed Medicaid waiver?
It would cost them some money, but I'm not sure what that formula is, but there is a formula. And I think there's some folks that could talk to that a little bit more. Right now,
I can speak to that a little bit.
limit. Go ahead.
Rachel,
Yes.
you've got the comp.
Yes, absolutely. So the individuals that are working aren't necessarily going to lose their waiver services completely by making money, but there is something that considered there. So as they make more and their asset limit is higher, they do have potential to lose their waiver services. So if they're making regularly more money than they can spend, then they are going to potentially lose their services, or they'll transition into a cheaper service system called Working Healthy, where they get very minimal Medicaid funded supports, but they are able to maintain that Medicaid insurance because it is so essential for them. But there's also other implications. So an individual who might be a tier 1 will get $90,000 of waiver funded services a year. But as they increase their independence through work and health, they're going to slowly go up that tier ladder and eventually might only cost $20,000 a year at a tier 5 level. So there is definitely some potential there for them to decrease in specifically Medicaid. But like stated before, there's SSI and SSDI that are absolutely going to go down once they start making an income, as well as food stamps and other subsidies.
Can you tell me then, if they end up working for a corporation that provides health insurance, do they go on the corporation's health insurance or do they stay on Medicaid?
Part of this should require that if they are working full-time equivalent or enough to be offered Medicaid, they do have the option to go on that corporation's insurance. COF has created a company called Integrated Employment Enterprises. The president of that company is one of the conferees here, and he can speak to that experience of employing individuals with disabilities and them getting to a point where they can be offered benefits and potentially work off of their Medicaid.
Representative Williams, did you have another question or comment?
Well, I just wanted to take a minute and follow up on the representative's comments about the bill that we passed several years ago. And Chairman, you also mentioned it as well. I think you alluded to it. And it looks like there's no layering here at all. They're getting a benefit because they're selling a product and they get a benefit, and then they get a benefit on both sides, but there's no layering. And I just wanted to know, is that correct? Am I understanding that correct? And I'm sorry, that's not a question for the conferee unless she knows that. She may, regarding the bill we passed 2 years ago regarding the 15%.
I do know that, Bill. I would anticipate that there should be some language put in so that there's not layering, but it was pretty different than the bill here. That's a 15%, I believe, to the total amount of work being provided, not specific to the paid rate that the individual is receiving. But I think that's a good point, and I do believe there should be some protection put in place so that there's not layering. But to Representative Carpenter's point, some of the full-time equivalents that were added part of that fiscal note could potentially fill both roles.
Representative Mason, I believe you carried that bill. Are you awake? 2044, you're kind of familiar with that. Is there overlap between these two? Can you speak to that?
I think the difference between the two is 2044 had to do with sales, and that was sales of merchandise that was produced by the IDD corporation. I think what you're talking about here in this bill is like a salary supplement or something like that. But in the numbers that we had run 2 or 3 years ago, whenever we carried 2044, there's a direct link between the number of dollars to allow that individual or that client to come off of a Medicaid waiver. And I think it was something like $11,000 in increased net sales. So for each $11,000 in increased sales, then someone could come off. So the problem with the fiscal note in this case and in that case is that it's a static. This is what it's see is what.
Any further questions for this conferee? Seeing none, we can move on. Up next is Craig Evans, also with COF Trading Services, and he has 3 individuals with him that would like to chime in for us.
Thank you, Chairman Tarwater and members of the Commerce Committee for the consideration of House Bill 2219. I will be giving a quick addressing you all first, and then I'll turn it over to the 3 ladies that are joining me. Like you guys, I wear a lot of different hats. As Rachel alluded to a minute ago, I am the president of Integrated Employment Enterprises. I'm also the director of employment and volunteering for COF Training Services. What that allows me to do is operate on both sides when it comes to obtaining and maintaining employment for individuals with disabilities. On the COF side, I partner closely with Voc Rehab and make use of all of those pre-established tools, such as community-based job tryouts and work assessments. Those allow qualifying individuals to go to a place of employment and basically have a prolonged application period. They get to work for that employer for up to 80 hours, not on the employer's dime. And they get to basically prove what they can and cannot do. We've had success with that program. Unfortunately, once that time period eclipses and the employee becomes a paid employer by the customer, that's where we see the relationship come to an end. And that's been fairly consistent. So what that's taught me is once the incentive is over, the relationship is over. So part of the thought behind our bill is a continuation of such incentive that continues to motivate and nurture that relationship between employee and employer. On the IEE side, this stems back to 2012. My colleagues and I at COF Training Services, we began studying in great detail the federal final rule, and we were also paying very close attention to conversations involving 14C. For obvious reasons, at COF, we made great use of 14C and we provided employment for a lot of individuals. 14C is, the lifespan of 14C is coming to an end. So we're definitely trying to think outside the box to find a suitable alternative for people with individuals that have relied on such employment model. In 2015, January 1st, as a matter of fact, we opened the doors to IEE. This was a collaborative relationship between the new entity, IEE, and COF Training Services. The hypothesis was, since day services, since community service providers will no longer be able to utilize 14C and pre-vocational employment as a qualifying day service program, what will we utilize our space for? COF in Ottawa, Burlington, and Osage City are not unlike other CSPs in Kansas. We have infrastructure. We have facilities that have allowed us to operate and provide these services to our clients for many years. These facilities are very compliant and very comparable to manufacturing settings. So they create possibly some sales leverage. What we did was we made a full investment in ourselves at that time, and we rolled all of our pre-vocational contracts over to IEE, meaning every employee that came to work starting January 1st was being paid at least minimum wage, $7.25. We had a pay scale between $7.25 and $12. In our first few years, IEE employed approximately 130 individuals. That's approximately 45 full-time, which we define full-time as 36 hours or more, and 85 part-time, which was 15 is typically what I saw, 15 up to 35 hours. Very seldom did we employ anyone less than 15 hours per week, simply because we were able to make schedule accommodations, and our goal was to provide as many earned income hours to that person as possible. So choice was a factor, but there were also some efforts on our end to really motivate that person to work more than what they were requesting from their employer. So now we have these three locations, these three integrated, competitively employed locations in our three counties, Coffee, Osage, and Franklin. What we saw was we were serving 7 Kansas companies, and the first few years were booming. And actually in 2017, IE celebrated a $1 million worth of sales. And again, with that volume of employees, no one was making piece rate anything less than minimum wage. We talked earlier about benefits. At IEE, if you work 30 hours or more, you are eligible for health insurance. One of the guidelines we followed was the definition, the Kansas definition of a certified business. That is an employer that employs at least 20% of their employees are a person with disability, and they provide health insurance to their full-time employees. We were doing that. I didn't have many individuals take us up on that, but that was something that we were offering, because again, that was one of our cost-saving goals. 2018, things started to change. One of our largest customers, BE Aerospace, was bought out by Collins Aerospace, and within 6 weeks, our contract with them was taken away and moved to the Philippines, given to the foreign labor market. We could not compete with their pricing. Later on that year, sizable contract we had with a local employer, the Walmart Distribution Center here in Ottawa. It got forfeited simply because they have a contract with a company that refurbishes pallets, and they no longer wanted to have multiple vendors. They wanted one vendor. I feel that, especially in the Walmart's case, if we were able to provide some of these incentives, I think that would continue to be a customer of ours. Neither of these contracts were forfeited due to a performance issue from any of our employees. In 2020, later in 2018, we lost another customer, Charloma Plastics out of Burlington, Kansas. They were bought out by a new company and they made the investment to go fully automated. So our team of 22 individuals was removed from that. Again, not a performance issue, just a cost-saving maneuver. Efforts still remained high. In 2020, we secured a contract with Tristar Publishing. They provide publishing services nationwide. And unfortunately, also in 2020, the pandemic hit. So our volume of work with them is just now starting to take off. So I'm hoping to have some good data with that customer at the end of 2021. The trend continued. We also secured through Source America a military government contract with RUAG. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic hitting in 2020, ammunition supply became scarce and that contract was forfeited. So just when things were getting to gel, things kind of fell apart, and that's no one's fault. That's a rare occurrence of this pandemic, but sales efforts are there. I do feel like we have customers out there that are in need of a labor force and they have work that this customized labor force can produce. A gentleman made a comment earlier that these can become very reliable, dependable, long-term employees. Absolutely. It comes down to that job carving piece. It comes down to that creative thinking on the employer side. Whether I'm working through VR with one-person placement in the community or whether I'm wearing my IEE hat and I'm the employer and I'm being creative because I don't want to dismiss any employee, it comes down to the motivation to be creative. And I really feel like that if an employer is given this benefit, they are going to invest more time in that employee than what they've given in the past. The past few years have been difficult on us. Due to that reduction in contract work over the last couple of operating years, IEE has been forced to forfeit a sizable percentage of its contract work back to COF and to the shelter workshop under the piece rate model. Simply because there's currently not a high enough volume of work to provide competitive wages. That's the magical equation here. The volume of work will sustain this model. These are going to be individuals that are going to be moving from maybe averaging $250 to $450 in piece rate, and now you're wanting to get them as high as $15, which I'm in favor for. That's going to take a lot of services, which are already there, a lot of creativity that has always been there, but it's going to also take the opportunity. It's not on our service end, it's on the employer end, the Kansas employers that are going to be, that need to be more motivated to give this model a try, because without them, we don't have a leg to stand on. The intent of IEE is not only to create jobs for individuals with disabilities and to create an integrated, healthy environment. Rachel talked a lot about quality of life. That's not the only intent. There's also the intent of it becoming an additional funding stream into underfunded programs such as home and community-based services. IEE was established as a 501c3B or 501c3A, and COF is a 501c3B. If IEE could be successful in providing subcontracted services to Kansas companies and generate a profit year after year, it would reinvest those profits into these underfunded state programs like COF training services. I will now stand for questions.
Questions for the Comfrey? Not seeing any. I tried to follow you. I'll have to get with you between now and then, because it was kind of unclear everything that you do. But is it, you said you deal with, you contract employees to Walmart, is that true?
Yeah, I'm sorry for not making that clearer. Yes, so basically, IEE is a temp service. The difference is we not only can deliver employees to your place of business, but we can house a portion of your operation within our facility. And it makes it, now I know why you didn't understand, because I left out a vital point. When COF created IEE, we repurposed our day service buildings where we once upon a time ran a sheltered workshop. That facility became an incubator for that community for employment. So in our 3 county locations, all 3 of those day service manufacturing sites became IE locations, housing multiple work operations from multiple Kansas companies in the intent to become a workplace incubator for those communities.
Okay, so then you're doing temp employees for different businesses around the area. Who gets the tax credit? Is it you or the people that are leasing your employees?
No, and I'm so glad you asked that question. I didn't want to interrupt earlier. The credit would go to the owner of the product. The owner would go to the business providing the FTE, not supervising it. I would be supervising it in some cases, but the hours are coming from Walmart Distribution Center or Charloma or Collins Aerospace. Our role would be to obviously provide customized employment strategies with individuals that have had a hard time obtaining and maintaining work. And then if there's anything we can do on our end, whether it be IEE and COF, to help with the fiscal note on any data collection, we definitely want to be a part of that any way we can help.
Okay, so that kind of gets to my next question. If I'm leasing an employee from you for $15 an hour, and that you obviously get a fee for that, and you're paying that employee $10 an hour, do I get a credit for the 15 I'm paying you or for the 10 you're paying them?
You would get a credit for what the employee receives. So if I'm paying that employee 10, then you would get a credit for 5.
Okay.
Typically how it works in the manufacturing world is, in my experience, my customers don't like being billed hourly rates. We quote piece rate basically by the unit. So if we build this jig for you and we charge $2 a jig and we build 5,000 of those a day in our manufacturing site, I'm keeping track of individuals that are on your team, how many hours they've worked towards your projects and what their earned income is. And that's 50% of that would be your credit.
Okay, that makes sense. And that's why our initial questions in the first part of the bill were, I got it, okay.
Certainly, spot on.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, you said you had 3 individuals that wanted to meet us today?
I do, thank you. Mary?
Hi, my name is Mary Gifford. Over the past 30 years, I have had several jobs in the community thanks to the help of COF Training Service and Voc Rehab. But unfortunately, I was unable to keep these jobs because my bosses were not happy with my performance, or they were not giving me enough hours so I was able to pay my bills. I was able to make more money working at COF Shelter Workshop, working on manufacturing contracts, but then we lost our big one because it moved overseas. I did such a good job of this that I was moved over to the Works program, Working Healthy. COF hired me as a DPS assistant, and now I work with other COF DSPs in the homes and at the shelter workshop. By talking with the clients and helping them with things that I know how to do, I help them with their housework, like cleaning their rooms, assisting with laundry, and helping cook meals. I help the clients at the shelter workshop by bringing them work and helping them stay on task. I work about 30 hours per week, and I'm able to pay all my bills. I support this bill because it helps provide work to people who need help at work and to those who want to live in a smaller community. Thank you.
Hi, committee. Anybody have a question?
Hello, my name is
Oh,
Chandler, and I live in Ottawa, Kansas. I have several jobs in the community with the help of COF Training Services and Vocal Rehabilitation. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to keep those jobs because I didn't do good enough job. I was working at Wendy's for more than 2 years, but then they cut my hours back to 5 hours per week. I enjoy working at Wendy's because I got to talk to the people while I was cleaning the lobby. I was not able to make enough money there, so I had to go back to the shelter workshop. I've worked at the CWF shelter workshop and the CWF thrift store for years. I work about 20 hours per week. I support HB 2219 because I want to work more for hours per week. Thank you.
okay, and we have one more.
Hello, my name is Roxanne, and this is my daughter, Sheila Brines. Sheila is deaf and blind, so I'll be speaking for her today. She's had several jobs outside of the workshop in competitive employment, but most of her jobs have come from the sheltered workshop. She's always enjoyed going to work, and she likes a set schedule, so she knows where she's going to be and how long she's going to be there. So if it changes, she wants to know why and when she gets to go back. She needs to be able to work in a consistent environment and with consistent schedule so that she can learn the job and learn it well. Any boss she's ever had has been very impressed with her work ethic and her production. But she needs to make sure that she's safe and she can travel within the work area. She likes to work between 15 and 20 hours a week. Right now, she actually is working at COF and also at Subway 2 days a week. So the variations she really does enjoy. She needs the time, though, to learn the job, to be able to do it good before she's switched to something else. With her being blind, it takes her just a little bit longer than the average person to learn a job. But like I said, everybody is very impressed with what she can do. We support HB 2219 because it allows Sheila to work in a safe setting on projects that she can be successful with. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you all, and it's good to see that you're all happy and safe and productive. And it seems like these workshops are good places for you all to go and have something to do, if nothing else. And you're productive for companies, and I think that's great. And you know what? Two of you said that companies might have let you go because they weren't happy with the work you did, and shame on them for making you feel that way, because I know you're productive people. So I'll open it. Anybody have any questions? Okay, that's it. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll work on this bill for you, okay?
Thanks for your time.
Okay, committee. I'm not showing any other conferees. Do we have anyone else online that might need to testify? All right, so I'm showing no neutral conferees and no opponent conferees. We'll go ahead and close the bill here. And that's all we have on the agenda. I do want to make a note for you all on the unemployment bill that we're working on Thursday. We're going to work it until we're done. And so that doesn't mean we're going to be done Thursday. We've got a lot of people, I think, with a lot of different amendments. So we're going to make amendments to the bill and discuss the bill on Thursday. Then probably on Monday, my plan is to, if we're done with the amendments, my plan is to let the interested parties weigh in on what we've done and then continue to work the bill on Tuesday. That's kind of how I want to do this because we put a lot of effort and time into this, and I think it's really important that we get it right rather than get it done quickly. And so that's kind of how we're going to proceed on that bill. With that, we've got the Kansas Scholarship, the Promise Scholarship, Kansas Promise tomorrow. So come prepared for that. Thank you very much. Representative Williams.
I was just going to remind the committee that the legislative post-audit regarding the Kansas Department of Labor fraud comes out next week on Wednesday.
Thanks for that. We're adjourned.